Welcome to All Things Moore County, Moore County's weekly radio show highlighting the many facets of the Sandhills. That includes real estate, lifestyle, community and neighborhoods. And now from 4 Properties, here's your host, Bill Sahadi.
Good morning and welcome to the talk show, All Things Moore County. Dorothy, July 4th next week.
Yes, it is.
Summer kickoff this weekend.
Woohoo!
We're privileged today to talk about the Sandhills Repertory Theatre in collaboration with Touching Humanity. They're presenting Bernstein on Broadway at the Robert E. Lee Auditorium this Friday and Saturday evening, the 29th and 30th.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, there's a Friday show at 7:30 and a 1 o'clock show on Saturday afternoon. I had the privilege of being up in New York about a week and a half ago visiting my 2 sisters. And
you didn't take me, I'm sad.
no, but look to see who I brought in today.
I see. You brought a bunch of New Yorkers in with you today, didn't you?
I feel like I'm back home again.
I'm sure.
And I can just listen to the way they speak, their sense of humor. There's a little bit of sarcasm in the Northeastern mentality that we're trying very hard to inculcate into Moore County. So it's like a warm blanket around me.
I'm sure it is.
Michael Pizzi is here, and Michael is the director. He also is a founder of Touching Humanity. And Michael, you were here last year when we spoke about Carousel.
Yes, I was. It was fantastic.
It was, and you are back again. And give us a little bit of background, not just of our guests, but about the idea of Bernstein on Broadway. This is your second foray, or no, it's more than your second.
Oh, we've done about 5 or 6 different concert cabarets in the area. Excuse me. And then when we did Carousel in Concert, that was our first really big show that included Broadway singers and an orchestra and 50-piece chorus that was all local. And we had such a good time, and I could not have done it without Terry Sinclair and Kirsten Foyles, who were instrumental in making it all happen.
Right. They are 2 of our favorite daughters in Moore County, and very passionate ladies, and you got a taste of Moore County and how important it is to how you network here and the value that's here.
Well, I recognize the incredible amount of talent that we have in this community. Right. I moved down here about 3 years ago, and was looking around for musical theater opportunities, and there were really no opportunities for me, who's a musical theater performer. So I said, well, let's do something about that. So I started bringing some amazingly talented friends, 2 of whom are here today, who did our very first show, Jen Mintzer and Greg Roderick. And we had such a good time, and the audience was very responsive, really responsive. So I realized people really wanted something like this in this area. They wanted more theater.
This is the 100th anniversary, the 100th birthday of Leonard Bernstein.
Yeah, 100 years.
So the the challenge of the arts in a smaller community outside of New York, because there are communities outside of New York City.
There are.
Which we're going to talk about
New York
today.
City is not the center of the universe.
Right. My 2 sisters might disagree, but they think Baltimore is the Deep South. Right?
Sounds about right.
Isn't it?
Doesn't that really, the Mason-Dixon line? People said, well, if you go south of the that's Baltimore, that's the Northeast. They think Ohio is the Midwest.
Isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah.
I thought so.
I'd love you to introduce some of the guests that are here, some of the singers that are going to be participating in the show.
Yeah.
We can go right around, and I'd love to just ask them a couple of questions. So
Yeah.
you can introduce them to me.
Absolutely. To my immediate left is George Psomas, and who's an amazing baritone tenor, who you will enjoy thoroughly, singing many beautiful songs from West Side Story and On the Town. And then we have Melissa Bonnetti, who comes from the world of jazz and opera. who currently is singing opera in Virginia, and she'll tell us more about that later. And then we have Greg Roderick, who was in South Pacific on Broadway along with George. And also, just recently, I saw him in an amazing production of Fun Home, where he played the dad, and his performance just blew me away. Then we have Larry Arnold, who's our music director for Bernstein on Broadway, and he'll tell us more about how he and I collaborated on this and his work. And finally, Jen Mintzer from New York City, who's done a ton of regional theater work and musical theater. So we have some amazing performers.
The minute they walked in and we started to talk, I got that vibe that I was home a little bit. And the audience here in Moore County is really a great mixture of people from the Northeast, from New England, from the Midwest, and from the South. It's different than it was 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of transplanted Northeasterners here who you'll be performing for. George, you mentioned you were from Wyckoff, New Jersey.
Yeah, born and bred.
And you grew up in New Jersey, and you don't sound anything like what a New Jersey accent would sound to most people.
Well, it's so funny. I was telling these guys yesterday, my first day of acting school, I went to Muhlenberg College in Pennsylvania.
I went to Lafayette.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Yeah, Lehigh Valley.
Only not probably the same decade as you, but I went to Lafayette. I know Muhlenberg.
But my first day of acting class, I remember, my first scene that I had done, and my acting teacher was like, "That was great, but we really got to get rid of your accent." And I was like, "What accent? What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And the whole class laughed, so I kind of got rid of it a little bit.
Nobody would mistake you for a Southerner, right?
No.
But, I had that issue when I first came down here in the 1970s, the dark hair and the larger than average size nose. People would look at me, and it didn't matter if I said y'all, they knew I was from Brooklyn. Is this your first trip here?
Yeah, I passed through years ago, but really this is my first time, and it's really beautiful. A lot of trees. I feel like I could breathe easier.
Right. It's a nice lifestyle. It's easy living.
It is. It's a nice pace.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're here, Bergen County. That's close to my heart.
Yeah.
And my Lisa, you are from nearby Queens. And I say nearby because the 5 boroughs are all interconnected in New York.
Yeah, totally.
They're not separate countries.
I mean, they kind of are. Some people who live in Manhattan, I don't think really leave Manhattan very often. But yeah, I was born and raised in Queens, and I was really fortunate to always have the arts in my public schooling. And I went to Louis Armstrong Middle School in Queens, and then I got to go to the Fame School in Manhattan, to LaGuardia High School. Yeah.
You know, one of the themes of our show in Moore County are the arts in the public schools and how important it is. And for some of the students who will be attending this weekend's production, you guys will wind up serving as terrific role models because people need that, to see that. And we have a couple of very talented actresses and singers and dancers here in Moore County, which Michael will talk a little bit about. And one who just finished, I think, is second runner-up, Miss North Carolina.
My dear friend Callie.
Yeah, Callie McIntyre. This is a 17-year-old young lady who sings, dances, writes, raises money for charities, did the pageant route and was a great spokesperson, and she's 17. So when she first came on the show, she and I sat down and we compared our resumes at 17. And mine was, you could see through it. Hers was like a book. And she is, I'm not quite sure where she's going to go to college, but I'm sure she'll be attending.
Well, I hope she'll come to New York City to go to college.
Well, that's what, right.
Right.
We don't know what happened. I don't know where that's going yet.
I don't know, but there are great things in the future for her, that's for sure.
But when you were 17, or you were 16, was this just a dream? Was it in your vision, your set of...
I never wanted to do anything other than sing, and when I was growing up, I think there was a pretty big Disney boom, so I think just growing up with like Aladdin and The Little Mermaid and all of that, always singing along, I don't know about you guys, but that basically set me on track to always want to sing. But I grew up in a very Hispanic environment, so I didn't know anything about theater because we mainly focused on maybe salsa, merengue, that kind of music. But as I said, going to Louis Armstrong Middle School, of course, I got introduced to the jazz world really young, because Louis is actually from Corona, Queens, which is my hometown. And then when I went to LaGuardia, that's where I found out about musical theater and opera for the first time. I had never even heard and had never even really gone to Manhattan, even though it's just a 30-minute train ride.
Right.
Until I went to high school. So, yeah.
Well, it's great to have you with us.
Thanks very much.
And Greg, this is not your first trip here. You've been with Michael before.
Yeah, Michael had me and Jen down here 2 years ago, April of 2016,
Right.
for his very first concert down here. So yeah, it's my second time around down here. It's beautiful.
How long has your career spanned?
Well, I've been in New York.
You can tell us. It's okay.
I've been in New York for 24 years, so I feel like a New Yorker now. And 2 years before that, I worked as a backup singer-dancer for country music legend Mel Tillis.
Really?
After I graduated college. I was born and raised outside of St. Louis, on the foothills of the Ozark Mountains, so I got a little bit of Southern in me. And
Right.
but yeah, so I was a backup singer for Mel for 2 years, and then that kind of saved my pennies, and then moved to New York at 23 years old.
Chasing a dream.
Yeah.
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 You perform in the city as well.
Yeah.
Quite often, different
Yeah.
theater companies and such.
Yeah. Yeah. Wherever.
You live in the city?
Yeah. Yep. I've lived.
West side, east side, lower?
Well, I
lower?
lived for 19 and a half years in Hell's Kitchen, which is just
Yeah.
west of Times Square.
That's right.
Which is where a lot of actors lived for many years because it was cheap. Now it is not cheap.
Right.
And then I got married a few years ago, and we moved way uptown to Inwood, which is the northernmost tip of Manhattan before you hit the Bronx.
Oh, really?
Yeah. North of the GW Bridge, George Washington
Yeah,
Bridge.
yeah. It's called Inwood?
Inwood, yeah. North of Washington Heights. So you've got top of Central Park, then there's Harlem.
Okay.
Then north of Harlem is Washington Heights, and then
Yeah.
north of Washington Heights is Inwood.
Yeah, but it's pretty cool to be able to get out of the city too and
Oh,
take
yeah.
your show on the road a little bit.
Oh, yeah, it's
Right.
great. Oh, and every time I leave the city and I'm around trees again, I live across from a park, so I get a little of my trees.
So there's a theme here about trees. Are there no trees in New York anymore?
There are
some.
no pine trees.
There are like 2 trees.
It's called the concrete jungle for a reason.
Yeah. New York has become super expensive. Unless you're living around Central Park, it's crazy.
Yeah.
The cost of living up there, and the pace. But
San
anyway,
Francisco still has its beat, though, I think. It's not as expensive. San Francisco is more
is that right?
expensive, yeah.
Is that right? Larry Arnold, you're the musical director over at Pembroke. Is that
I'm a professor of music.
professor of music
UNC Pembroke.
and the musical director of this particular production?
I lucked into a job.
Just 3 or 4
It's a
weeks.
summer job.
It is, huh? But just 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had the chancellor and provost from UNC Pembroke on, and we were talking all about what a hidden secret Pembroke is to the students of Moore County, with the tuition programs that are now available for students who might not, when I went to Lafayette or you went to Muhlenberg, tuitions were a lot less money than they are today. So Pembroke is growing. And do you live here in Moore County?
I live in Moore County.
Yeah.
I live in Aberdeen.
Okay.
My wife Nancy is the music director at Bethesda Presbyterian Church,
Okay.
and I play for the choirs
This
on
is
weekends.
okay. This is a great opportunity for you.
Yes.
During the summer season.
Yes, it's a better class of people I usually get to play with in the summer,
Uh-huh.
and so I'm looking forward to it. And I've been saying it's once in a lifetime opportunity, 100th birthday of
Yeah.
Leonard Bernstein, and to dig into the music and get to know it has been an academic's dream. I had a lot of respect for Bernstein, but now it's increased a great deal.
I seem to remember, Michael, growing up watching the Ed Sullivan Show, that they had Leonard Bernstein on
Yeah.
from time to time. And when we were kids on a Sunday night, that's what we did. We sat with our parents and watched the Ed Sullivan Show before all of your times, but not before yours or mine.
Right, exactly.
But he was more than just iconic. And it's hard to believe he'd be 100 today, this year.
He was also a great educator. His lectures are still part of what we teach students
Right.
at the university when they come to study music. I did want to say that we have 5 students from Pembroke who have come and are singing in the chorus, helping us out a great deal.
And they are amazing. They have an amazing music program at Pembroke. Let me tell you, when these kids open their mouths to sing, I'm like, they're professionals already. So what a pleasure to work with them.
Yeah. And as I'm sitting here looking across the table at Jen Mintzer, I probably feel more at home looking at you. You remind me of so many people I grew up with in New York. And you're born and bred in New York?
Well, sort of. I was actually born in the Philippines, which is a little factoid, a little Jen Mintzer factoid. My father's a veterinarian, and he went to school in the Philippines. But we moved back to the States when I was 2,
Okay.
and then I lived in the Hudson Valley, which is just 2 hours north
That's
of
right.
the city. Yeah.
So the eye rolls and the face, and the facial impressions and the humor, to me, it's all New York.
My parents grew up in Brooklyn, so
That's-
that's where I soaked that eye roll, and I'm not eye rolling too much, I hope.
Tell me a little bit about your career.
Oh gosh, my career. Well, I'm sitting down now, so you can't really see me in my full length, but I'm pretty tiny. So when I graduated from school, I moved to New York, and I auditioned for all the things that little tiny sopranos audition for. And I spent a lot of my early years doing lots of Fiddler on the Roofs, lots of West Side Stories, lots of Fantastics, lots of things where little sopranos spend their time. And that's been really most of my career, and it's been wonderful.
How long is your career span? Can I
Oh, gosh. I moved to the city in the year 2000.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. Well, welcome back,
Thank
and really welcome to all of you. We're going to come back in the second set and love to talk a little bit about, Michael, how you're incorporating not just these talented individuals, but some of the people here in Moore County, in the area, to make this a hybrid type production.
Absolutely.
And keeping the arts alive in the face of a lot of the younger people coming up. We're talking all about Bernstein on Broadway. It's a theatrical journey put on by the Sandhills Repertory Theatre in collaboration with Touching Humanity, which we also want to talk about. This is All Things Moore County. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our second set of talking all about this weekend's production of Bernstein on Broadway. It's going to be held at the Robert E. Lee Auditorium Friday evening at 7:30 and Saturday afternoon at 1 p.m. Tickets can be purchased at touchinghumanitync.org. And VIP tickets are $50, but general tickets are only $30. There's a military discount at $28 and students for only $20. Tickets at the door will be $35, but you can go online today and save a little bit on the tariff getting in. These ticket prices are not New York prices.
They are not New York prices, but
Right.
they are Pinehurst prices.
Well, and even if they're still so good, but this is not being done. This is not a profit center. This is not something you're doing to create wealth. I mean,
No, it is not my
Very-
career.
that's right.
And I'm glad
Talk
you.
a little bit about
I'm glad
that.
you brought that up. When I came here, I realized there was no musical theater around, and I'm at a point in my life where I want to start giving back more, be much more philanthropic. And one thing that I have is the skill of being a performer and putting really creative people together to create art. And so I wanted to do art for charity.
Right.
So it started with Touching Humanity, which really is my not-for-profit that promotes disability awareness through the arts. But because I want to do more and more theater in the area, we're incorporating a not-for-profit called the Sandhills Repertory Theatre, which will be the first musical theater not-for-profit in this area to do things for charity and to bring Broadway people down from New York City, but also to include the community, which is near and dear to my heart, because I feel if any organization is going to be in a community, you should be including the community. And there are so many talented people here, Bill,
That's right.
that I would be remiss if I didn't include more people. So if any talented people are out there, please email us, and we'd be happy to talk with you and audition with you. So Bernstein is our first inaugural production, and it came about because it's his 100th birthday, and he's written some iconic shows such as West Side Story, which everybody loves. So we have a huge portion of our show dedicated to West Side Story, and with these amazing singers and music direction, Larry got the entire chorus and orchestra together. And it is a tribute to him when you hear these sounds Friday and Saturday. Not so much to what I've done. All I did was put it together. But I am so privileged to be working with such talented people who, by the way, jumped on board when I said, and we're doing things to promote performing arts in the schools.
Right.
So a percentage of all of our shows with the Sandhills Repertory Theatre will go towards helping performing arts in the schools. Because of budget cuts all the time, that's one area that really needs
Right.
funding.
Right. I don't know what it's like in New York, but here with our school budget, you know, unfortunately, arts are usually the first thing to get looked at. Like, can we thin it up a little bit? And it takes away a lot of ability for some of the students who want to express themselves to excel. They're just not going to go to school for math and science. What is in it for them going forward? What are their dreams? And there is an underbelly here of support for the arts with a lot of very proactive parents. There are dance companies. But the reality is doing live production is very expensive. And it's very difficult to get it out there. But you remember as a kid your first aha moment when it either was a live performance or someone who caught your imagination, and those impressions are indelible. They've never left you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I don't think the Sandhills Repertory Theatre will survive unless we have audiences that come and we have people who support the arts. Right now, for people to underwrite a show would be amazing because we're bringing amazing singers and performers down and including the community. There are people out there that I know support the arts, and financial support is what every theater company requires
Right.
to actually survive.
Right. George, I have to ask you, when you went to Muhlenberg,
Yes, I did.
what did you think you were going to do in college? Did you have a major? Did you have a goal? Did you know you wanted to be in the arts at a young age?
I did. I actually started performing as a kid. I was telling them yesterday, one of the first productions I ever saw, I was cast in a production in 4th grade, and my godmother had said, "You've never seen a musical, so you got to see one." So my cousin was actually in her production of Fiddler on the Roof in high school. So I went and saw it, and I was sitting in that audience watching a high school production of Fiddler on the Roof, and I was like, that's what I want to do. Ironically, years later, my last Broadway show that I just did was the last revival of Fiddler on the Roof. So
Is that right?
It was very exciting to sort of have that full circle moment. But going to Muhlenberg, I always knew I wanted to be a performer. I was a theater major, but I was also a business major, which was something I always wanted to do. And, you know, talking about arts in schools, it's so important. And a lot of the things that, even in the business program, a lot of what I brought from the theater program over to the business program was really what caught their eye. I mean, I had 2 job offers going out of college.
Right.
And of course I didn't take them because I wanted to move to New York and be an actor. But
Right.
they were saying, you have such a unique way of looking at these assignments. And I said, well, I'm just thinking about them creatively.
Right.
So, and I owe that to arts and acting and growing up in the performing arts.
Yeah. Jennifer, I want to ask you, your first memory or your first impression that sort of shifted your vision about what you wanted to do?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'd been on stage sort of since I was 3 or 4. I started dancing, so, stage never felt, it was just always part of my lifeblood. It was always who I was. But my parents took me to see a production of Cats on Broadway. I think I was like 8 or 9. And I'll never forget the white cat, the ballerina cat, and she's the one that just does this gorgeous dance sort of towards the end of Act 1, and I was mesmerized. And I thought, the whole theater was just silent. And I remember thinking, it's so incredible that people can create that experience for an audience. And from that point forward, I was like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I'm not someone who dances like the white cat, I will tell you that right now. But I just remember feeling like, what an incredible feeling, and I want to be able to do that.
Right.
But I saw you in Cats.
You sure did, but I was not the white cat. I was the kitten who didn't have to do a lot of the long leg lifts and stuff, and I'm much happier moving quickly and then getting off the stage. But yeah, it was a really iconic moment. And I think for my generation, that musical, I hate to say it, but that musical really meant a lot to a lot of people. But yeah, that stuck with me.
Well said. No one here is so shy, huh? No one's shy here.
No, I don't hire shy people.
Melissa, I'm going to ask you, one of your early recollections, inspirations.
Oh, one of my inspirations. Well, actually, although my parents are tone deaf, apparently my grandfather left behind a bunch of serenades that he composed. So my family, even though they can't sing, has tried to revive those. So I did grow up hearing, I should stop insulting my family, but poor renditions of original Bonnetti serenades written in Spanish. And I guess that was a really big inspiration for me because they were all ballads. And so other than Disney, basically those family songs that I grew up with was a huge inspiration for me. But bringing it back to public education,
right?
And I didn't know it at the time, I was so lucky to always have so many artistic mentors in public schooling. And I was, able to play a lot of instruments growing up because there were so many programs that you could be in the chorus, or I was playing violin in first grade and piano. And so I've done a lot of outreach in the States. And I've probably sung about 900 shows in public schools for outreach, trying to have something for kids in different communities to grasp onto where there are no music
kind of a way of paying it forward.
A
little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Greg, I have to ask you the same question.
Well, when I was in 3rd grade, I was just a normal kid growing up in the Midwest, and being in the Midwest, you don't have the opportunities or access that you have growing up in the Northeast.
Right.
So my artistic outlets were limited to when my parents wanted to go see something at the Fox Theater or the Muni Theater in St. Louis, which was an hour drive into the city. But in 3rd grade, the high school was doing Scrooge, or the Christmas Carol. I think that was called Scrooge. And they needed a Tiny Tim. And my music theater teacher, or my music teacher, elementary music teacher, Delane Schlemeyer, recommended me. Here's this little kid who can sing. So I did the high school production as a 3rd grader, and that kind of caught the little theater flame. But then I really kind of went back to being a kid until I was in high school and did the high school plays. And then my first year of college, I was being the good Midwesterner and studying things that were not arts-based, because as a good Midwesterner, you're told that getting into the arts is a no-no. You can't make a living. Right. So, I remember going to see something as a freshman in college at the Fox and looking at those performers on stage. It was Anything Goes with Mitzi Gaynor.
Oh, my.
I remember. And I looked down at those people on stage and thought, well, they're doing it.
Yeah.
They're making a living doing this. Yeah. Why couldn't I? The worst thing I can do is fail at it and go back and do something else. But, now's the time to try it. So I immediately changed my major and started, working on my arts career.
I hope some of our students in Moore County, their parents, are listening to this, because the common theme that I hear is you all had mentors, you all had inspirations, and those impressions, as you were talking about Scrooge as if it were just yesterday. Kids remember you make an impact, and they don't ever forget. And I think it's very touching, and I hope parents bring all their kids out to the production this weekend, and they'll see what can happen.
And I want to add that
Yes.
any parent that thinks that a child cannot have a career in the entertainment industry is wrong, because not just as a performer, but the entertainment industry in the country is enormous. It's one of the most economically driving industries in the country. There are millions of jobs in the industry, whether it's a performer or a crewman or somebody that works
Right.
on sound or lighting or sets or anything. It's massive. So don't discourage your kids into getting into the arts.
Well said. Well said. Bernstein on Broadway this Friday evening, June the 29th at 7:30, and Saturday afternoon at 1 p.m. at the Robert E. Lee Auditorium. The Sandhills Repertory Theatre they're giving back. They're trying to make an impression and keep the arts alive here in Moore County. This is All Things Moore County. We'll be right back.
And she'd say I love you. But once on shore, it's not such a snap. You get the cold shoulder, the old runaround.
Thank you so much for that. That was gorgeous. That was the gorgeous voice of George Psomas, who is in our Bernstein on Broadway that's going to be at the Robert E. Lee Auditorium this Friday evening at 7:30, and then Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock. Tickets are still available. Get them now online or at Given Library, a country bookstore, because they're much more expensive at the door. But they will be available. So we look forward to having you come in. We are here today with some amazing performers that I was fortunate enough to meet, to know, to become friends with, as well as our music director, Dr. Larry Arnold from Pembroke University. He is not representing Pembroke University for this gig. He is freelancing here with us. And when I had the idea to develop Sandhills Repertory Theatre with the inspiration of Terry Sinclair and Kirsten Foyles, I approached Larry and said, I'd like to do this 100th anniversary of Bernstein. And he said, great, when? He didn't hesitate. So Larry, can you tell us a little bit more about the process and why you jumped right on board for Bernstein?
I was introduced to music by my mother listening to opera and classical music, and I went into a rock band. But the story so I played rock and roll for a long time, but my first experience was actually in public school. In 5th grade, we had a field trip, and we went to hear the Omaha Symphony where I grew up. And they played Overture to Candide. And I was so amazed at all of the violins bowing together. It was like a show to me. So and then, when I went to study music, some of Bernstein's music has always been some of my favorite, the Chichester Psalms and many other of his works. And we don't have there's not been a composer since Mozart who has been so successful in so many different musical styles and genres. So I've not seen a lot of events about Bernstein or Bernstein. It just seemed like a wonderful project to get involved in.
Oh, great.
And the first thing I had to do was learn a couple of songs that you wanted to put in the show.
Yeah, I'm a big Bernstein fan, so I've seen everything he's done probably at least twice, and so I'm familiar with a lot of his music. So he of course, for those of you that might not know, is the composer for West Side Story, but also the show Wonderful Town that starred the amazing Rosalind Russell, And on the town, which is about 3 sailors who go on land for 24 hours into New York City and fall in love and have to say goodbye. And, of course, Candide, but also the beautiful Bernstein Mass, which we are presenting Simple Song. And Greg is going to be singing Simple Song, which is just a glorious piece. When I approached Larry, one of the first things, it's funny you should talk about Candide, one of the first songs I knew I wanted to have was Make Our Garden Grow, which will be in our show. And I said, but we need a great chorus. And you got together some amazing voices from our community, which I'm very excited to present to everyone.
And that was a team effort. You brought in some singers. My wife, Nancy, who directs a choir, brought in some singers, and I invited some students to come, and they've all come together very well.
Yeah, the voices are astounding. It's going to be an incredible finale to our show, so I hope all of you can come out. I'd really love to tell everybody, too, the Sandhills Repertory Theatre, as I said before, is really donating a percentage of all net profits to funding performing arts in the schools, because I'm really passionate about having kids learn and be part of the arts. I know I was an arts kid, and without the arts, I would not have known that I had different skills and talents that I could bring forth into the world. I think that all of us here have had that experience. But because of funding cuts, we need more people to support that. Can each of you tell me how the arts in your schools, I think some of you gave us some stories, but how did the arts in your schools actually tell you in your heart that this is what I want to do, this is how I want to be in the world?
I guess I can say that the arts, getting arts education serves actually various different purposes. Even if you don't become a performer, or that's not your final thing, the arts teaches you so many different things, so many different skills, including discipline and communication with your peers, hardworking ethics, and I feel like I came from a town where, although in New York, really didn't have exposure to the arts, and I feel like not only did I grow into a beautiful business and career, but I just grew as a human being, and I found a sense of self, and I think that it's important, even if you don't want to become the next Broadway star, it does set you on a path for success, I think, in anything that you want to do in life, to be involved in it at a young age.
And the arts and music are so essential for every child, no matter your level of ability. I know I've done research with kids with special needs, and in just 4 sessions, 4 one-hour sessions, I watched them grow, or my outcomes were, they improved in self-esteem, self-confidence, their motor skills improved, but most importantly, their social skills improved. And that was because of the arts. And it doesn't take many sessions in order for that to happen. So the arts are a profound experience for every child, and we need every child to be exposed.
And to piggyback off that, I think it also, I said this earlier, but it fosters a creative mind. I didn't relate to biology. I didn't relate to algebra. Those weren't the things that I excelled at. But, you know, being a performing artist and being somebody who understood the arts and music, it really did infiltrate the rest of my education. So I'm so thankful for that.
It's funny that you say that, because I mentioned before that my dad's a veterinarian, so science was a big part of my upbringing, even though I never really got it. And I remember in high school when I started to get involved with the high school plays, and my father kept saying, "You're burning the candle at both ends. Your studies are going to suffer." My grades were never better than when I was in a high school production or a production of some kind, because I cared and I was working harder and I was more alive. So I think, for anyone, especially growing up in the town that I grew up in, it was a very big sports community. And so that was the value, right? So the high school, musical theater productions were sort of less than. But all of us, we just cared more about the work we were doing and the people around us. So it goes back to what Greg said earlier, for the people who are sitting here thinking, arts is fine, but not really part of my child's development and probably not a career for them. Doesn't matter at this point. Just let them get involved. It really changes who we are.
I'd like for our audience to actually step back for a minute and imagine a week or a day that you did not hear music or see anything that's entertainment, that you had no TV, you had no social media, you had no exposure to the arts. What would that be like if you just went stone cold, no arts in your life? That's the essential ingredient, I think, to life itself, is the arts.
As a layman at this table, I've had the privilege to observe what the students who are involved in the arts, what they get out of it. And I grew up in northern New Jersey. I was a jock. I was a basketball player. And the arts were not on our radar screen. But the amount of courage that it takes for these kids to perform. You can't hide out in a huddle. You're out there on the stage, and the self-esteem is directly correlated to the amount of courage you put out. And that stuff, whether you're going to be in the arts in your life or just a supporter of the arts, that self-esteem comes out. It's a consistent theme.
I have a great example. Jacob Parker, here's a shout out to you.
Yeah.
Jacob, I first worked with a couple years ago, and he was one of the shyest kids on stage, and I had to give him a certain direction here and there. And in just 2 years, he just won a major award from the North Carolina theater community. So Jacob's a really great example of someone who puts his heart and soul into the arts and really expanded who he was as a person. And I think that's really what the arts does for us.
Did you happen to see him and Callie and the Addams Family?
I did not see the Addams Family.
They were terrific.
I heard they were amazing.
Terrific.
Amazing.
Yeah.
We have some amazing high school musicals here in this area. A tribute to Adam and Judy and
Adam
Kim, who are just incredible people and big supporters of the musical theater world here. I just wanted to finish up. This is Michael Pizzi, who's I'm executive director of the Sandhills Repertory Theatre, our new not-for-profit. We have some incredible Broadway people coming down besides Bernstein on Broadway this weekend. We have Marissa McGowan and Michael Mendez, straight from Broadway, who are doing their own show about how they fell in love, but it's going to be through song, from Cole Porter to Sarah Bareilles to Rodgers and Hammerstein. In September, we're doing A Grand Night for Singing, which was off-Broadway and won many awards, and 5 Broadway stars, including Zach Prince, who was in our Carousel last year. By the way, Marissa sang with the Philharmonic last year.
Did she?
So people are probably very familiar with her voice. Then in October, I have Erin Davey and Christopher Lowe. Erin just got off of A Little Night Music on Broadway with Angela Lansbury and Catherine Zeta-Jones. So this woman has some career. And also, one of the most exciting things, Bradley Gibson, who was a Pinecrest High School graduate, is going into his 3rd Broadway show in just 5 years in New York. So I'm bringing him down for the Homecoming concert. And finally, we're doing a Sandhills Christmas.
Your career has spanned how many years?
My career has been, I started singing when I was 5.
So he won't answer my question.
That's
He won't answer my question. I started
So
singing when
5
I was
years.
5.
I just celebrated my 60th birthday with a charity benefit concert.
So the art of giving back and the art of trying to pay it forward is a gift. If it touches 2 people this weekend, it's worth it. But it's a financial commitment, and it's a burden. It's hard.
It is.
Not easy.
Which is why we need those underwriters to help support our community.
Right. But you guys have an opportunity this weekend to touch a couple of people who maybe were like yourselves when you were that age. And they might talk about this one day when their parents took them to see the Bernstein on Broadway production. Time is unfortunately short, but I want to thank all of you for coming in. And Michael, I'm glad that you reached out.
Thank you so much, Bill.
We're
for having
gonna,
us.
yeah. This is a great opportunity for people in Moore County this weekend. There are 2 shows: Friday evening at 7:30 at the Robert E. Lee Auditorium, and Saturday afternoon at 1 p.m. Tickets are $30. Military discounts $28. Students are $20, and you can buy tickets at the door. You go to the website touchinghumanityin.org to purchase tickets, and I wish you guys all the best. I hope you have a great turnout, and you keep touching people's lives.
New York, New York, it's a hell of a town.
Thank you all for coming. It was a pleasure. Really, it was a
Thank you very
a
much.
pleasure.
Thank you so much.
This is All Things Moore County, and we will see you next week. Thank you.